Welcome back to Beyond the Wrench. My name is Jay Goninen, and I am your host. Today I have with me Josh Taylor. Josh is a husband, father, and founder of multiple businesses, including Wrench Turners Online, Just Work Hard Consulting, and the Wrench Turners podcast, which if you haven't tuned into, I would highly encourage you to do so. He is also a 20-plus year veteran of the automotive industry and a licensed automotive mechanic. Experienced repairer with HD, mobile, and power sports, Josh has taken his knowledge and put forth a business focused on improving life, wellness, and productivity of technicians across the globe. Josh, how are you doing today?
I'm very well, Jay. I appreciate the opportunity to have another conversation with you here and hopefully help somebody out.
We've had some really cool conversations over the past year or so, and I'm always intrigued by what you're doing. You've really become a great voice for technicians. I think a lot of the stuff that you're doing is in an effort to make technicians' lives better, which is what this podcast is all about. And just excited to have you on, to be able to talk with you for an hour here. But just going to do what we do with most guests, which is let's talk about how you got into this industry. What drove you to want to become a technician?
Well, thank you for that wonderful intro. I think my grandfather got me into it, to be honest. Going back a very long time now that I feel like after my son told me I'm old tonight, that's okay. The gray is not just showing my son is calling me old. It's not even inferred anymore. He's just straight up saying it. So long time ago, I recall stories of me standing on the bench seat of my grandfather's old square body, and we called it Big Red. It was a big old plow truck, 2500 Chevy, and we'd go plow driveways. And I remember being, I don't know whether I remember being or I was told the story so often that it just became a memory. Being 3 years old, standing on the bench seat, turning the steering wheel, plowing. And I would reach over and hit the plow switch to go up and hit the plow switch to go down like I'm driving. And, that just kind of started it off because at that point and forward, wherever my grandfather was, I was. So if we were fixing something, I was fixing something with him. Whether it was the truck, the cars, the lawnmowers, the chainsaws, whether we were building fences, sheds, whatever the case may be, I was there with him and I was there fixing it and I loved it. And over the years, it just progressed more and more. I think once I hit high school, I enjoyed the moving stuff even more so. I understood better what it is. I had motorcycles on as posters on my wall. I had race cars on my wall. I've got some of the models like I do behind me. I think the first dream car like I've talked about is one of the first gen Vipers. I had one of those on my wall, and it just progressed further. I managed to, my grandfather was very good friends with a local dealer principal owner of the local Chrysler store, Daryl Sly. Managed to get me an interview with the service manager at the time, and I started pushing a broom at the Chrysler store. Got my apprenticeship there, moved around a couple of times, finished out my apprenticeship, got my RSC here in Canada, so I'm a licensed tech. Worked at Toyota store, worked at another Dodge store, came off the bench automotive-wise, spent a couple of years as an advisor, right in service. Got an opportunity to be a fixed ops director at a Mitsu store, run parts and service. Managed to get into a Benz store. Wrote tower, well, I didn't write, sorry. I was tower admin at a 25 tech bay doing $1 million a month. And this is back 2010, give or take. Lots of time progressed through there. Got an opportunity to be a GM at a collision center. I've worked with a digital marketer as strategic advising, doing operational work. And here we are. I managed to get out of the city, move back home, have a little man. And I'm now working 6 minutes away from my house, which is amazing.
Awesome.
Trying to get my second license. So I'm turning wrenches on motorcycles.
It's such a unique journey and path in how you've kind of weaved through the industry, right? And I think it's allowed you to see a lot of different aspects in both from the technician's point of view, the manager's point of view, and really maybe how difficult all of those positions are, right? Like I think that perspective is really unique, and I think it's really helpful to just understand there's difficulties in every job out there. It doesn't matter how glorious it looks. Like there are challenges regardless of what you're doing.
Yeah, I think somebody summarized it. The only thing I haven't done is formally sold cars because I think I had somewhere in the neighborhood of like 36 bird dogs while I was writing service for the Dodge store. So I've quasi sold cars, but I've never sold cars. But I think that kind of is a testament to how important building relationships with your customers as a service advisor is. Building enough trust and loyalty and commitment to relationships and so on and so forth in service, writings for service, where customers after a period of time, when they trust you enough, you just walk them into an office and say, hey, he's here to buy a 300C V8. He's got this package on his Jeep. He wants to get into something that he doesn't have to climb into. I know there's a red one out back that he likes, and walk away.
Good luck.
And a couple hours later, there's a $100 check, so to speak, on my desk kind of deal. Those are the kinds of things that I like doing back then, and it builds more trust and trust and trust.
Yeah.
And being able to say, I've worked a little bit in every area. I've worked a lot behind the bench, but I've worked a little bit in every area to know enough that there are areas where I excel at, and there are areas where I don't excel at. I know that there are areas where a certain kind of human being really excels at. The kind of individual that excels well in parts. The kind of individual that excels well writing service. The kind of individual that excels when you're on the bench. There are transmission technicians. There are engine technicians. There are diagnostic technicians and so on. Knowing that there are differences between them, knowing how to fill that role maybe a little bit better. But one of the biggest things that I've always struggled with is communication as a leader. So that's why I'm not leading any of those kinds of stores anymore. I don't think, at least at the time I've come off the bench and now to where I am, that I was a strong enough leader in that regard. And I think that's one of the reasons why I'm kind of doing what I'm doing now, to add to the pile of reasons why I'm doing what I'm doing now. Is I need to be on this emotional intelligence learning journey as much as everyone that I'm trying to help. There is nobody teaching it to us as mechanics to contextualize the experiences that we have growing up in this industry, turning wrenches for a living. Nobody's teaching it. And there's lots of folks out there teaching it at the leadership level. When you have a leader who understands and can comprehend what it's like to look at a P&L statement for a month in service with 30 ladies and gentlemen on the bench pushing $1 million a month, that's not outside the realm for them. That's just a normal month, right? Whether it's a good month or a bad month for them, that's a different story, but that's just a normal month. You put $1 million worth of expense and revenue going through a business in front of a mechanic who's never seen that kind of many zeros on anything before. That's just a completely different territory.
Right.
So for those leaders to learn about emotional intelligence, to learn about their shop, that sounds normal. But the people behind the bench need to learn it too, because if you can't be a good receiver of that, you can't be a good team member. You can't be a good employee. You can't be a good use for the rest of the team. So I'm hopeful that what I am doing, and as much as I'm doing it, I'm hopeful that somebody's learning some empathy from me, and somebody's learning from, humbleness from me. I may not be humble at all. Usually I'm arrogant, and usually I'm ignorant, and I got a whole lot to learn. But I think part of, shall I say, my riz, as my son calls it, my charisma, is that I am who I am. I'm nothing else.
I think that's a beautiful thing, though. And I think as you grow older, I think there were a few things there that you said that I thought were very interesting, because I think it's very similar in my experience, in that it took me a long time to come to terms with the fact that I'm not great at everything, right? Like there's things that I'm really bad at. And And I think it's okay, right? Because not everybody's great at everything. And I think when you come to that realization and you really start to understand what your strengths are and you play to your strengths and you really maybe try to understand what those weaknesses are as you're doing, it helps so much with your personal growth. And I think it helps you become a better person. What you said in terms of leadership and the requirements it takes from a communication standpoint, it's not easy. It's really easy to read about in a business book. It's really easy to talk about. That communication, and especially as it relates to the manager technician relationship, is very complex. And a lot of times we don't give it the time it needs to be able to really have good discussions about it, right? Because I agree. It is a hard thing to do. And even when you think you're on the same page with the tech from a manager standpoint, you could be completely off base. You could be completely missing the mark. And so those things that you're talking about there were, I think, very honest, and I think they're very, very true.
Thank you. And you bring up a good point. You can do a lot of reading, and you can do a lot of, you can listen to me. You can, and technicians should be listening to you, and lots of other leaders that are posting a ton of content on LinkedIn and TikTok and Twitter and so forth. There's lots that you can learn from them, but I think the hardest thing to learn that I still struggle with is, and I say this in coaching, it's the steps between the steps. So from a leader to a technician, or a technician to a leader, it's not necessarily what was said. It's the time between something is said, something is received, and then something is said back. That gap between, understanding that you can lengthen that gap, pause, breathe, really think about what was said, and then respond accordingly, not knee-jerk respond. That is one of the single hardest things to learn. I suck at it, but I'm learning and I'm getting better. And I think the single most important thing that is teaching me how to do that is having a son.
Yeah.
I think becoming a father, anybody can be a dad. You're it happens. You're on the birth certificate, so on and so forth. But to be a dad, a genuine dad, you have to learn to listen, understand what was being said, and respond accordingly. Nothing will slap you in the face faster than a 9-year-old who doesn't understand you. That is bar none. And whilst I don't take this as belittling men and women out there on the bench, it is exactly the same way. When you respond to someone in the shop, whether you're a technician talking to a technician talking to your boss, or a boss talking to a technician, if you don't take that 10th of a second to think about what's being said and then think about what you're going to say in return, you might as well be talking to a 9-year-old. Like it doesn't matter, because you're just going to hurt them. You're going to say it incorrectly. You're going to say it without compassion. You're going to say it without empathy, and you're going to say it without thought, really. And then disaster strikes, and now you have someone you're probably anxious, they're probably anxious, they're stressed, they become more easily depressed. It leads to all kinds of bad crap that they tell me in coaching sessions. And it's just bad news all around. So take the pause. And I think that's one of the biggest things that have helped me.
It's great advice. And in my experience with technicians over the years, that's one area that I really try to get across to them is really be thoughtful in your communication. Because when I was on the management side, it was pretty common, maybe a technician lets things build up and they don't talk about it, and they just, they snap, right? So they open your door and say, "What the hell's going on?" Blah, blah, this, that, they're list off a laundry list of things that weren't great or perceived as, putting them in a corner. And the problem with it, And I didn't really have this issue with techs where I felt like I treated it one tech differently than another. I felt like I kind of treated them all, as equals. And I've seen it the other way. When a tech goes raging into an office, they get blackballed essentially and are, now on the outs, right? It does permanent damage to a relationship off of a reaction that, if played differently, could have been completely different. And I think that's the beauty in what you're doing, is being able to get somebody to take a breather and think through something, talk to somebody before you go to a manager and do damage that is not repairable, right? And it ultimately means that you're going to have to move your toolbox to a different location or a different place, because there's just that awkwardness from then on. And I hear it from a lot of technicians, and it's so preventable. I mean, it is so preventable. And I think good managers understand that and can get around that. But there's times where you're just going to get pissed off and say, screw it. I'm done dealing with this person, right? And I think that's when techs kind of walk themselves into dangerous territory.
For a limited time only, you can invite technicians, service advisors, students, and other industry friends to create a free individual account on WrenchWay and earn free t-shirts. The 3 t-shirts up for grabs include popular industry sayings like, "Waiter's gonna wait," "Make mechanics cool again," and "Fix what others can't." Here's how it works. Retrieve your referral code by logging into your WrenchWay account and going to your profile. Don't worry if you don't already have a WrenchWay account, you can create one for free. Then share your code with your friends. Make sure those you refer enter in your referral code when they create their free WrenchWay account. The more people you refer, the more t-shirts you can win. This is a limited time offer that is valid through May 31st, 2023. So don't miss your chance. Click the link in the show notes to get started.
It's a challenge. It's a challenge from both sides of the coin. So you've got technicians across the planet, but contextually I have information and data from the US, but you have technicians from across the planet who are having similar challenges. If you're talking about bleeding edge product from any manufacturer, seldom is any of the diagnostic information or the repair information hyper accurate, which causes conflict on the bench. You get that built up over time, especially by, let's say you've got a large shop and you've got 30 to 50 technicians. That means you're probably also a high volume sales dealer. So you've got lots and lots of brand new product, which means you as a dealer are going to have a lot of the less than 1% of failures come in, and you get to be the guinea pig who gets to figure out what the problem is. The challenge is on those repairs, those technicians who have the training that puts them capable of doing a warranty repair on that item, on that product, on that bleeding edge product, they get to be the guinea pig. And if they're flat rate, it also means their paycheck gets to be the guinea pig. High value leaders understand the difference between allowing their technicians to be a guinea pig and supporting technicians in learning. Two things are very, very different. If you have a high value leader, it's like, okay, we've got a 2024 on the shop floor right now. Francesco's working on this HVAC problem that engineering has never seen before. That's a brand new product. It's a brand new model. Nobody knows how it works. He's been on the phone for 6 hours with engineering. He's probably going to get paid 0.5 for his diagnostic when he does eventually figure it out. I can't let Francesco lose. Shall we say, the archetypal villain that many mechanics paint service managers to be. Is like, they're not going to care about me. They're not going to care. All they care about is getting paid. All they care about is selling another brake job to another customer. If I'm not making them any money, or I'm making less money than the guy next to me, I'm of no value to them. They don't care about me. That's the mentality. Even if it's only a percentage, or even if it's a small percentage. I have technicians I coach that they come to me asking me, how do I make more money? Well, there's tons and tons and tons of ways for me to help you make more money. But the first question, that's the most important question, is, are you happy fixing cars?
Right.
That's the most important question you need to ask. If you are happy doing this, I'm happy to help you. But if you're not happy doing this, I'm not going to waste my time and your time trying to figure out how to make you more money, because this stuff is hard. Like if you wrench for any manufacturer or not, you work for an independent or a mom and pop shop, if you don't love doing this and happy doing it, no amount of money is going to make you happy.
Mm-mm. Such a good point. I mean, it really is. And I think that hits on and is a good segue to what we wanted to talk about today, which is mental health of technicians, right? And really getting to that question of, are you happy? Because if you go out to a Facebook group and you see the messages going back and forth, the common conversations that are happening in shops where you've got experienced techs telling young techs to run,
mm-hmm.
they're not happy. I think, I don't know why, right? Because everybody got into this for some reason. It's not like you got into it looking to be miserable. You got into it because you probably loved cars or trucks or whatever you're working on. But something's driven you to the point to where mental health is now I think it's a big concern in our industry. And this is what I'm so excited to talk to you about today, because you are studying this. You are studying what technicians are happy with, maybe what they're not happy with. And so I want you to talk to us a little bit about what you're doing from that standpoint. How are you trying to get in touch with these technicians and learn more about them?
Appreciate that. So context is always important, and I try to teach my son that, and I coach that. Context is important. So understanding from a technician's point of view, if you're telling me you're unhappy, we got to figure out what it is about, whether it's your work that's making you unhappy or it's your home life that's making you unhappy. If it's your home life making you unhappy, there's not a whole lot I can do about that. A professional therapist, please do your due diligence. If you are, big D depressed, chronic depression, things of that nature, or you don't know, you need to seek professional help. That is not me. That is not anything that I suggest that I do or even recommend that I do. I'm here to help you be happy at work. That's first and foremost. Two, the reason why I'm doing that is fundamental. A year and a half ago, give or take, I realized that as someone who wants to be an entrepreneur, who wants to be independent on my own, helping people, because I've been saying I want to help for over a decade, and my wife goes, have you figured out who you want to help yet? And I realized that I need to be helping the community that's provided for me for 20 years. So how best do I do that? Well, I have a unique set of experiences, like you said, and I have, unique skill sets that maybe somebody else doesn't have, and I have a unique history. And it led me to do some research about, what makes mechanics tick, and then reference to my own life. And then I came across a really scary article by the CDC posted in 2016 that defined people who unalive themselves on a yearly basis in the continental US. And it listed it by profession. And mechanics are in the top 3 professions. So it lumps a group of people by categories and so on and so forth. But men who are mechanics are in the top 3 professions that unalive themselves every year. And in 2016, that meant 311 mechanics. So it's scary to think that we can count, the CDC counts how many people, human beings, unalive themselves every year, and they can determine that 311 of them were mechanics. That was scary to me.
When you say unalive, suicide?
I can't, I try not to use that word because it usually flags stuff, so it's okay.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that we're like on the same page. It's a serious thing, right? Like that's like unreal.
That's scary. Okay. And it's very, very scary. And it brought me to the fact that within my first year and a half in this industry, a young man, and I've told this story before, a young man, there was 5 apprentices at the Chrysler store, and we had a shop foreman, and one of the 5 apprentices, we all grew very close. We got very, very close. I had a great shop foreman. He did all kinds of stuff that he's the reason why I'm in this industry. Like, if I had to go through the stuff that I had to do and didn't have him, I wouldn't have stayed. There's absolutely no way. One of the apprentices, the kind of individual, that blonde haired, blue eyed, built like a Brit Shirthouse, very charismatic, very intelligent, he was racing, professionally racing go-karts on the weekend, went to the clubs and had all the women that he wanted. That kind of individual, like the kind of individual that had everything, at least from the outside. I came in on Monday morning and he had hung himself. And as someone who's 20, 21 years old, only ever experiencing a very close family death once, I hadn't really, it was my grandmother when I was young. I didn't understand what that meant to me. And it adds more to it that, I found out Monday morning and the entire shop still ran. Everybody still did their job that day, albeit we all were lethargic, but we all continued, especially on the shop floor. And that leads into your statement, technicians bottle things up. And it grows and grows. And then to some that bottle it up and don't speak to somebody, it can end badly. So the community itself needs a voice. The community needs people who are willing to listen. And even if it's just to listen, and I've said this before, even if just for listen, I regularly say my phone number on podcasts and on video clips, my email, my phone number. If you need to talk, call me. I don't want that any for my brothers and sisters in this trade. Like this trade is too hard, and it's very hard on us as a whole. You look at statistics and numbers that, aren't as nasty as that number there. Anxiety cost the continental U.S., businesses in the U.S. $42 billion in 2022. That's anxiety. That's not depression. That's not so on and so forth. They haven't quantified it like that, the CDC. That drives all kinds of lethargic action. Well, anxiety can be changed in certain ways, especially in the working environment. Right now the catchphrase is culture. I don't like that word because it speaks too deep. I think just look at the working environment. What is a technician's working environment that's causing them to be this way? Well, pay's one, and those who are unhappy already typically just bring it up. Being their pay per hour, pay plan, and their dislike for the warranty times. Well, okay, that's one area, but there's a whole host of other things that are contributing to anxiety, depression, severity, if big D depression, where people need professional therapy, which again, if you are having any stress, anxiety, depression, please seek professional help.
Yeah, absolutely.
But when you get into that level in the working environment, truly asking those questions especially as a leader, shop foreman, shop super, lead technicians, service managers, fixed ops, ask specific questions. And these are the things that we do with children. Like, instead of asking, how was your day? Good. How was your day? Bad. Those are not helpful. But ask specific questions. Hey, I was asking about. I made a post. I think it was yesterday, the day before. It's like, if you're a technician and you use the press, please, for the love of God, clean up the tools off the press. And I've got a whole bunch of response, and thank God of it. And sarcastic responses. It was wonderful. But that should be a narrative that service leaders follow through on. You ask the technicians in your shop, every time I walk by the shop press, there's always tools on it. Are they your tools? Are they our tools as a shop? Yeah, they're shop tools. It's like, well, we have a tool room, and we have all the really expensive tool cases with the foam inserts in them where they're supposed to go. Well, yeah, nobody puts them away. Well, why? Well, because the tool cases are out. Why? Well, because they're all disorganized. Why? Because there's no place really for them to go. Why? Because the shelving's broken. The shelving's broken? Yes. Can it be fixed? Yes. If the shelving was broken, would the tool cases go away? Yes. If the tool cases could go away, would you put your tools that you use in the tool case to put away? Yes. Now we have a problem. And now we just solved it using the and what else method by listening and asking until you get to something that you can solve. And if this problem is a rack in the tool room and it requires you to call the shop foreman over to say, hey, why isn't the rack fixed? And it's like, it's on my to-do list. Okay, make it your priority tomorrow, bring in the welder, fix the rack, spend 2 hours with the apprentice and get all the shop tools put away. Now as a service leader, you've listened. Now you understand an anxiety problem and an efficiency problem, and you've fixed it. Now that technician who told you all that trusts you to fix stuff. Now instead
That's a big one.
Now instead of taking however long the rack's been broken, they're going to come to you next like, hey, the rack's broken again in a different spot. Can we get it fixed? Fixed. Those are problems that come up in coaching because I ask. I'm not doing anything special. I'm really not. Even though they call me a therapist, I've been called a therapist a half dozen times now. All I'm doing is listening. And realistically speaking, the service leaders that I've gotten the chance to do one-on-ones like I'm doing with you kind of right now, the ones that are absolutely crushing big numbers, like you've got service advisors running 2.5 to 2.8 per RO, you've got, month over month records, you've got technicians, multiple technicians making six figures, many or in a really high volume shop making 150, 200K. They're the ones that are listening. It's nothing special. It's really nothing special. There's no book. It's literally just listening.
That's great advice for anybody, right? The listening side is so hard. And I think you're so spot on with what you're saying. And it's very, very, very familiar to me in when I talk to technicians and a lot of their complaints and why they leave one location to go to another. And what I really enjoyed about the way that you dissected that, and going back to even earlier in the conversation is, is this an at-home issue? Is this an at-work issue? Do you not like working on cars? Hey, no, I actually like working on cars. I just don't like the person I'm working for. Or maybe it's a teammate in the shop that they don't like working with. I think there's so much that goes into that, but all of that drives their anxiety and drives their uneasiness. And I think I love the way that you just broke that down and like that shelf analogy, because I think that is so common in every shop, yet we just don't talk about it. Right. And I think it's easy to kind of bury that and, hey, that tech's unhappy. Let's just throw more money at them and see what happens. Right. And I think even from a technician's perspective, a lot of times, and you alluded to this as well, we think money is just going to fix all of our problems, and it's not the case. Like there's so much more that goes into it, and so much value in that tech that's out there struggling right now to go seek professional help if they're struggling. Your story, it kind of took my breath away a little bit, right? With hearing your personal experience with it and how close you've been to it, because it's a real risk. And facing the fact that this isn't an easy thing to do, but being able to recognize that at times you might need help, and that's okay. Like you need somebody to talk to. And I just think that was so powerful.
I appreciate that. And hopefully, hearing that somebody out there will seek professional help. And it doesn't need to necessarily get even to that deep a level, right? We have statistics where, it's 1 in 20 people are thinking about unaliving themselves. 1 in 200 people. No, sorry. Let me make sure that I'm absolutely clear on this. It's 1 in 7,000 people, and not technicians. 1 in 7,000 folks are succeeding at unaliving themselves. That is a really harsh reality that infiltrate shops. You think, businesses that are on that are, publicly traded companies. You think that's a 5,000 to 7,000 people company, or sorry, 5,000 to 10,000 person company. That means one person in that company every year unalives themselves. That is a statistical number based on the American government's data. That is a scary thought. It means that how many of those people in that company now have to deal with someone who has done with that? Do you have policies and procedures in place to deal with grief? Do you have policies and procedures to deal with mental wellness? Do you have policies and procedures to deal with check-ins, mental health check-ins? When you have large dealer groups, if you've got, let's say you've got 100 dealers in a particular dealer group. I'm spitballing. I actually don't know off the top of my head how many dealers fall in, or groups fall in that profile, but I digress. 100, and the average technician count per is 50, and you've got 100. That's 5,000 technicians. Statistically speaking, that means one of your technicians every year unalives themselves. And how much do technicians talk to other technicians in a dealer and group? You have group sessions, group meetings, so on and so forth. You have cross-training and so on and so forth. And you have, if you have a group, you have a technician going from an Audi store to a Volkswagen store, and a Volkswagen store to an Audi store, and so on and so forth. That news will spread like wildfire. That grief will spread like wildfire. It's crazy to think how quick that negative energy will spread. It takes a lot more positive energy that it does to overcome that than it does negative energy to infiltrate. It's a challenge, and it's one of the reasons why also I created the wellness survey to do basic check-in. What are some key areas of the working environment that service leaders can correct quickly to try and alleviate low-level rumbling anxiety? Anxiety causes productivity loss like crazy, like
and
absolutely
unhappiness, and it spirals,
snowball.
right? Like, yes, it's a huge snowball.
Thank you, Truck Country and Stoops Freightliner Quality Trailer, for being a sponsor of Beyond the Wrench. Truck Country and Stoops is the largest family-owned and operated Freightliner dealer group in the U.S. today, serving customers in locations of Illinois, Iowa, Indiana, Ohio, and Wisconsin. For nearly 60 years, they've offered new and used medium and heavy-duty trucks, expert service, and extensive parts inventory, and more. If you're wanting to learn more about Truck Country and Stoops, visit truckcountry.com.
I'm interested in this wellness survey, right? Because everything we're talking about here, we know this is a serious thing, and I think there's a lot of leaders out there that want to have a better grasp of how to handle this, right? And how to handle the happiness in their shop. I don't think there's a manager out there that wants people to come in unhappy, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
it has such a negative impact on everything, and it's just not fun to be around an unhappy place, right? So when you're looking at this wellness survey, can you give us an idea of what types of questions you're asking, and then what kind of feedback are you getting off of it?
So there's I'll try to get this brief because there's a lot of data that I collect. So I'll give you a brief intro here. So there's 3 sections. Section 1, the technician, so the service leader will come to me and say, I want to do the survey. So we submit the service leader, walks around with QR code, real fast and easy. Takes the average technician 12 minutes to fill out the survey. They can do it on a break, and it's done. Takes me a little bit to process the report, but then I can come up with what's in front of me. Section 1 tells me about the technician themselves. How many, where are they working, how many years in the trade they've been, what brand they work for, what level of certification they have, things like that, productivity, income, and so forth. Section 2, shop life 20 questions about their working environment. Trust, performance, feedback on service advisors, productivity things, challenges, special tools, basic working environment questions that allow me to ask more questions of the service leaders. What can we do to do this, or suggestions on how to fix. But the shop life 20, based on their feedback, gives me a priority list based on the team. So if you've got 20 folks in your shop and all of them bomb the question about special tools, that needs to be a priority for the service leader to fix. Conversely, if it happens, if all 20 completely bomb the pay plan, your pay plan needs to be adjusted. It doesn't necessarily mean more money or less money. It means it needs to be appropriately adjusted based on the context of the shop. And then in section 3 is life satisfaction. And here's where the really juicy stuff comes in, because when they answer the life satisfaction questions, you get an understanding of the overall wellness of the individual. And then it contextualizes all of the other information they've given. So when you say, when leaders say, just give them more money, if the shop life tells me no, they have other concerns, it's a no. But as you get data on the survey, certain patterns emerge. Like for the most part, the shop life 20 identifies the areas that the team wants improved. But at a certain income level, they all want the same things. So at this stage, after the amount of technicians that have submitted on the survey, $55,000 is about the number where technicians stop focusing on their pay plan being wrong or different or out of place, and they start focusing on things like communication. And just about everybody who makes more than $55,000 that's submitted on the survey, their top priority is always being listened to on the service drive. The number one, almost unanimously across the board, their top priority is wanting to be listened to by the service drive. So they're going to the service drive with a question or calling the service drive with a question, and they don't feel they're being listened to. And that's at 55. The happiness level, the life satisfaction score, if you contextualize that, let's outside the shop life 20 here for a second, just income. Life satisfaction versus income. So anybody that responds low, and I'm sorry that I didn't say this earlier, but life satisfaction score ranges from 5 to 36. The lowest possible score is a 5. The highest possible score is 36. No one has ever put a 36 on the board. No one. Highest ever is a 33. Gives you an understanding. And it ranges from obviously extremely dissatisfied at the bottom to extremely satisfied at the top. If technicians respond and their average is extremely dissatisfied, 5 to 9, their average income is $38,000. If a technician answers extremely satisfied, their average income is $108,000.
Wow.
That is $70,000 of delta. And here's the rub. You would assume that everybody's that's making that rough wage, if you look at the data individually and you break it down, you would assume that anybody that's making that wage roughly is all extremely satisfied. That would be an incorrect assumption. There are folks who are making that wage or more that still answer extremely dissatisfied with life. There are also the opposite. There are folks that answer extremely satisfied or very satisfied on that list that only make $55,000. So that kind of reaffirms that target level. Once technicians make roughly $55,000, things fall into place and they start helping the team. And that goes to the next step. Why is $55,000 so important? Well, if you look at the rough average of most states, now different cities will be different and rural areas will be a little bit different. The cost of living for a family, if you are an individual in a family of 4, the cost of living is roughly $55,000. So once an individual who's working in a shop makes the cost of living or more, their life satisfaction dramatically increases. So just being able to pay the bills.
Sense.
So if you think about the average dad, 41, 2 kids, that is the average mechanic. So if the average mechanic can't make $55,000 based on their current pay plan and productivity, their life satisfaction is going to be in the dump. They're going to be depressed. They're going to be grumpy. They're going to be ignorant. They're not going to want to be a teammate. So as a service leader, what can you do to make them happier? Well, make sure they can pay their bloody bills.
Yeah.
Like, what are you doing to help them pay their bills?
I think even to that level, it's understanding and listening. And I think the interesting part that you brought up there to me is that there's unhappy people that are paid a lot of money too, right? Mm-hmm. And I think, that is concerning because I think that opens up a whole other bag of worms where, maybe even though they're making that much money, they've bought a lot of toys and they have a lot of stuff and a lot of debt. And maybe that's, hey, maybe we bring in a Dave Ramsey course or do something around budgeting, or, maybe it's just, you just aren't happy in general. And I think being able to, again, talk to somebody about that, I love the way that you're breaking this down into different, I say this all the time in the content we do. Our industry is so guilty at putting all technicians into one bucket and saying that they're all this one person, right? And there's so many unique personalities and so many different characteristics of good technicians, but we still look at it from the view that all technicians are the same. And I think the data that you're providing here really shows the differences and how wide ranging it is. I mean, it is crazy what you're saying here, and not crazy in a bad way, crazy in like, this is what I've been trying to say for so long. And it just quantifies it, right? And I think that's the most impressive part, is really being able to dissect this to the point to where we have a better understanding of our teams. And that is invaluable. There's so much value in that.
Being able to make objective decisions as a leader, you need to be this is personal opinion, and there are those that may disagree, but I think one of the most important things that you need to be able to do as a leader is to be able to make decisions based on objective information, and you need to be able to make those decisions as fast as humanly possible. And when you are presented with objective information, you are more likely to make the best decision for the team to go forward. When you make subjective decisions when you make decisions based on subjective data, you get grief and you get emotion and you get the byproduct of irrational thought throughout the shop. It's a challenge. I've referenced, job ads and the old school, and you're helping to alleviate that with WrenchWay. But Indeed and Glassdoor and those, they give ranges for technicians. With the survey long term, I'm hoping to be able to provide a platform for technicians to be able to go on to a website or app, maybe eventually down the road, like Bravado does for salespeople, so that they can go on and they can click and they can go, I'm a technician. Okay, I work in the state of Ohio. I work for a GM store. I'm a 10-year technician. I've got my level 3 brand training. And that's my salary, roughly, or what I should be earning every year, because enough technicians who are that technician have submitted and say, okay, I make $78,000, $78,500. I make $79,700. And if you get enough contextual information, you now become a much smaller box to value, so that you as a technician or you as a service leader listening can go on and go, okay, that's objective information. I'm not, it's not a number out of a hat that I think that you're worth. It's all of your peers who are very, very, very close, if not the same as you in terms of brand training, state, brand, whatever, just like you make this. So it's fair for me to pay you this. And conversely, technician goes like, well, okay, that makes sense. So everybody's fair. So you take the emotion out of it, make it objective, and go forward. And that leads to a whole nother subsection of questions like, okay, now you got an interview to deal with. And I'm trying to help with that too. Coaching sessions have led to technicians who said they don't ask questions during an interview. Why not?
Right.
Why not? So I'm working on something to try and help with that.
It's really cool. And I think going back to some of the mental health stuff, right? And as we look at this, and I don't want to put maybe all leadership in a bucket. I don't want to put all technicians in a bucket. But, when we really speak to what our mission here at WrenchWay is, which is to try and promote and improve the industry, this feels like something that's a bigger issue than we're giving credit for, right? Like, I don't know that there's been much talked about in our industry around mental health of technicians, and of our staffs in general, right? Not just technicians, but everybody. Mental health has become more of a, I think it's been great to see the transparency. I think you're starting to see some celebrities come out and talk about mental health. I'm a big basketball fan. Giannis just came out and talked about some of his mental health. I think being able to get that to be more of a common conversation can help a lot of people. And what you're doing is kind of bringing that to the lights, and really putting a spotlight on it. And it's sorely needed. I mean, at the core of our industry, for technicians, they need to be happy. And, we talk a lot about shops that maybe aren't driving happiness amongst their teams, and how much of a concern that is. How many techs are leaving the industry altogether because they don't think that there are better shops out there. They've been burned a couple times, and they maybe just think that's the way every shop is. And, we know better. We know there's some really good shops out there and some great leaders in this industry. The tough part is when they don't find those people and they end up just leaving. And, you went to the extremes, but there's some that, that when they leave the industry and they see, at some levels, the perceived, level of happiness on the other side of the fence is actually better. That doesn't do our industry any favors, right? Like we're going to continue to struggle with this as an industry until we get our hands around this. And this data, I think, helps move us in the right direction, right? This helps us get an understanding of those individuals, not just technicians, just individuals. They're people. Who are they, and like what can we do to maybe prevent some of the bad things that happen with some mental health stuff.
And I think the thing that's most important, if anybody takes anything from this, is you need to listen and ask questions. I don't think there's any greater thing that any leader in any business can do than just ask questions and listen. I would suggest that you can solve probably 90% of your problems by doing that. In coaching, that has helped more of them. Like I rarely see a second session for most. I'll sit down. Most first sessions are like, it's gotten pretty long now. It's why I think it's starting to turn into kind of therapy. But I'll spend 2 to 3 hours with somebody just listening. And it's like, well, thank you for listening. You're welcome. It's what I'm here for. What can I do for you? It's like, I'm good. I just needed somebody to talk to. I realized that I complain a lot. It's like, yeah, And I probably shouldn't. Yeah, and you said it, and I say this a lot. It's like I've really tried to burn this in as many people as I possibly can. I get to go to work. It's not I have to go to work. I get to go to work. I get to work on cars, and recently had a Nissan technician. It's like, I get to work on GTRs. You do. That also means that you get to go out and drive them. Like, even if it's only for a 10-minute test drive or a 5-minute test drive, just to make sure everything's good, you get to drive them. Like, you happen to be at a Benz dealer, I get to drive SLS, or I get to drive a C63 or whatever the new one is. Like, you get to drive some really cool stuff and bleeding edge stuff. It's really cool. It's like, and you get to get paid to do it. Yeah, but it's like, okay, we'll work on the other stuff that I can help with, but you get to do it. And if you don't enjoy doing it, then let me try and help you find either another place that makes you happy, or you need to look for something else, because I can help you find something else that can use your skills. Like, there's a lot of things that you can do after being a mechanic. Like, there's a ton of stuff that you can do after being a mechanic. You have a lot of skills after 15 years in this industry. So I don't want to see any of my brothers and sisters leave, but I also don't want anybody stay and be unhappy.
Right. But I think you're re-emphasizing the love of why you got into this in the first place. And, I think so many of us forget that over the years, because it can be tough. It can be challenging, but I also hear that from my friends in other industries as well, right? I hear a lot of the same complaints, and I've got friends that are pharmacists that hate being pharmacists. And I think at some fundamental level, it's coming to an understanding with, and almost re-falling in love with why you got into this in the first place, and being able to appreciate those little things. And yeah, you know what? Your back probably doesn't feel as good as it did 20 years ago, but look at all the skills you gained in that 20 years. I mean, look at how much you've progressed. And I think so many techs take that for granted, like how talented they've become, and how cool that is. Electrical diagnostics, the amount of intelligence it takes to diagnose is incredible. And like the fact that a lot of us don't take a second and appreciate how far we've come over the years, I think is really damning. Some of these people, what they started out as to what they became, and largely have become numb to that, is insane. I mean, I think there's so many techs out there right now that just, they hear it, hey, techs are talented, blah, 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 but they look at their paycheck. It became all about pay, or it became all about something else. And that took the joy away from them. And that's unfortunate, because I think when you fall in love with your job and how cool, like you said, being able to do some of the stuff we get to do, is pretty darn cool, man.
Very. And, it emphasizes, Jordan Peterson talks about the difference between men and women. And I like this analogy that men are typically interested in things, and women are typically interested in people. And when you're talking about technicians, how this is relevant, well, we're really interested in things. And when he talks about how you separate, the two fundamental things that make men and women different is culture and biology. And you bring that into the shop, and the fundamental differences that make the differences between technicians is the two things that they like to do the most in the shop. And if you lean one way, if you keep one thing constant, the other thing that is the major variation. So if you love what you do in the shop, and that's a constant, but you walk into a place where you don't want to be, it dramatically affects your love of doing that thing. So the working environment that technicians work in is as important, if not more important, than their ability to do it. So if you walk into a dirty shop and you're not a dirty person, you instantaneously are not going to be as productive. If you walk into it anxious. Now, you could be an individual who doesn't like a clean shop. You know, I know techs that will literally happily work in shit. And I don't mean that figuratively. You know, I've worked with a technician who could fix anything. And I mean anything. There's a tractor stuck in cow shit out in the back pasture, and he would go out there with sticks and a couple of stones and he'd fix it. And he'd get it out. He didn't care where it was, how it was. He just turned back and he had this literally shit-eating grin on his face, and it was running and driving. And there are technicians out there that if there happens to be a spot of dirt on the ground, they freak out, right? But as a leader, and this is where the two dichotomies exist. As a technician, as a coach for technicians, I constantly preach the first thing that you need to do is find a high-value leader, but more importantly, a high-value leader that fits you. And conversely, as the high-value leader, finding technicians, you need to find technicians that fit you. And then it's your responsibility as the high-value leader to provide the tools, resources, energy, and time to that technician so that they can perform their best. Because right now, based on my data, only 30% of technicians feel they can perform their best, which means 7 out of 10, for whatever reason, are basically flogging the dolphin. And that's not very good in business. You're getting awfully close to Price's Law. So it's a challenge.
Well, I applaud you for everything that you're doing. I think the cool part is your heart's in the right place. You're doing it for the love of the industry, and I just commend you for everything you're doing. This was such a fun conversation. I think an important conversation to have. Hopefully we are able to continue this conversation because I think there's so much we weren't able to get to, but that listening piece and something that, you know, every leader I think has work to do there to listen more. But the way that you were able to bring this information to our audience and just honestly, everything you're doing out there, I'm a huge fan and just can't wait to see what you do with this because you're going to do some great things.
Awesome. I really appreciate that.
All right. Well, where can people find you? How do they track you down and pick your brain?
The easiest thing to do is find me on LinkedIn, Mr. Joshua Taylor, wrenchturners.online, or the website, wrenchturners.online. You can email me, leader@justworkhard.com. Easy peasy. And cell phone number. Text me, 416-550-7691.
And where do they find the podcast?
Oh, sorry. Yes. Find Wrench Turners.
I gotta mention that.
I thank you for that. Wrench Turners podcast. Easy. You can find it on just about any streaming service: Spotify, Stitcher, Google Podcasts. I think it's now called Apple Podcasts. I was gonna say Anchor, but Spotify bought Anchor not that long ago, so it's just Spotify now, and Spotify now does video. So that's an interesting new feature, and I think I put out my first video, and I think my first the lad said yes to video, so it's going to YouTube next Tuesday. The first 10 Mil Mastery is going to get posted to YouTube as well. So Wrench Turners on YouTube.
Well, congratulations on your success, my friend. Look forward to following your journey and staying in touch.
I appreciate that very much, Jay. Thank you very much for having me on.
That wraps up this week's episode of Beyond the Wrench. Be sure to tune in next week for another brand new episode. As a reminder, don't forget to rate and follow Beyond the Wrench on Apple, Google, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. This helps us get Beyond the Wrench in front of other fantastic shop owners, managers, technicians, and dealers just like you, so we can continue to help improve, promote, and grow this amazing industry. Thanks everyone for listening, and we'll be back next week.